It's 3:47, and I'll call the meeting to order. Thanks so much for being here. This is a meeting of the Arpa Needs Assessment Committee. It is a special meeting, so we will not be making any adjustments to the agenda. And the first thing on the agenda is to approve our minutes from our meeting back in, no, it's not in front of me, so I think it was July 6th. Do you guys have any?
I think it was before it had to be because in the press release that went out was dated June 20th.
Hold on, I'm gonna look at the agenda.
June 16.
I'm gonna look at the agenda because I sent the minutes.
It said on your site that you have a recording from July 6th.
Do you have the agenda for today?
Yeah,
Tell me what it says,
it
please.
says July 6th.
July 6th. So our last meeting was on July 6th. And if we have had a chance to review the minutes, I'll entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
I'll second.
Just want somebody want to, I'm going to take you, Joe, as the first. Anyone want a second?
Yeah.
Thanks, Barbara. All in favor, please raise your hand. If any are opposed,
I abstained. I wasn't at the July 6th meeting, so.
that's fine. The motion carries. And just so you know, Robert's rules do allow you to vote on minutes even if you weren't there.
Oh, really?
Yep, we've flipped it. So, the next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have any comments from among the public who are here at this meeting?
You know, I do have a question. I'm just wondering if the distributions as planned have been posted anywhere?
They've not been posted anywhere to my knowledge, and we'll hear more we'll hear more about that likely during this meeting.
Okay, great.
Sorry, what is your name?
Elizabeth Place.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Please. All right, so now this is what we're here for today, the main portion of our meeting, which is a report out on what has happened since our last meeting. Our last meeting was a meeting to agree on the report that we presented to the select board. Of course, the select board, if you recall, ratified or I don't want to use a word like that, but basically accepted the recommendations that we had made, launching an application process. And let's hear what happened since then. I believe, Barbara, you're the best person for that.
So the first thing that we did, Jean and I created a flyer and we posted these all about town, posted on the town website, sent out a press release. In the back of this, it tells you the different places they will put. And on the far left, those are all the places where I put packets of 50 flyers, because the flyers were a little bit different and they had applications stapled to them and different things. So there was more than just this. But I couldn't obviously put packets of flyers everywhere because not everybody could accommodate that. So some places only got pinup flyers. It was on social media, on the Kent website, and on the Kent Facebook page. And I was told that it would refresh weekly. I don't know how long it refreshed for. And then I did do a couple of responses via email to people who had reached out directly to me. And I have on my list that we did a direct mailing postcards to all Kent mailing addresses. But I don't think we actually ever did that. I just asked Jean to double check. Because I think the only postcard that went out was the one that we did as the group.
In the beginning.
Yeah, I don't remember this other one ever coming to fruition. So that's how it was advertised. And you may remember that we had put a cut cutoff date of August 30th on the application process. So before I hand this out, I just want to make the caveat that there are individual names on here of individual taxpayers. So if you don't think I should hand this out, then I won't, and I'll just talk about it. I don't know what to do. I really wasn't expecting to have to make it public today, but
I don't think it should be from
I don't
the
think it should be
individuals.
public either. Can you quantify the?
I absolutely can. But I don't know if I can give you guys documents and not make them available to the public. I don't know. I didn't have, I mean, I suppose I could redact the individual names from the individual people. I don't think the businesses and nonprofits, it's that as sensitive. But I
That
think
doesn't need to be redacted,
Yeah,
probably.
I agree.
No, but the individuals, just the
individuals.
individuals should.
they're on here.
But the individuals are receiving town funds,
No, they receive
from federal funds. Yeah.
Could you just number them?
I did.
Yeah, I mean.
I can just talk to
That should be
it.
sufficient, I would think. Why do we have to know who they are?
It was just the way I created the report. It was, I just didn't think that there would be people asking for individual names. But anyway, the town of Kent received $821,854.76 in ARPA money in 3 different tranches, the new terminology. The final tranche was received at the end of September of 2022. So by that time, the grant application program was up and running. The grant application, through the recommendations that we made to the Board of Selectmen, allocated $400,000 to be distributed under that manner. The rest of the distribution for the balance of the funds were direct recommendations that our board made in our final report. So for the business category, we allocated $100,000. 13 applications were received. There's still one application that I'm waiting to receive additional information for, namely tax returns. I did apply the same process to every single application, whether it was personal, business, or nonprofit. Everybody had to submit tax returns. I created a formula where I could plug in different pieces of the tax return to calculate what their revenue loss or income loss was due to COVID. We could only assume, I mean, the tax returns just go from one year to the next. And if they fell within a certain range, then they got either 100% of what they asked for on the application or a portion of what they asked for. So of the 13 applications received, one application did not qualify through that process that I just described. One application is still outstanding, 11 checks have been issued.
Are you gonna hand this out?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I want to give it to you guys, but if I do, does that mean I have to give it to the public?
I think we can wait.
Can you rip off the first page?
I think we could wait, well, for the report to be modified so that there are not personal names on it. And if it needs, we end up adjourning and having another meeting in a week. Okay, I would like to have it in writing for the committee, but, for the commission, sorry, but I don't think that we need the personal names.
Okay, so for the individual and family applications, $100,000 was allocated. The maximum grant was $5,000. 15 applications were received in the category. One application did not qualify, and two applications only qualified for partial grants. But other than that, all the people got what they asked for.
Can we back up to business for a moment?
Mm-hmm.
How much money was distributed out of $100,000?
Well, I still have one application pending of a $10,000 application. There's $18,200 left, including that application out of the original 100.
Including meaning if it's funded, there will be 18,000.
If that last application is funded, there'll be $8,200 left in that category.
I have a question, Barbara.
Yeah.
Actually, a couple of questions. Okay, so you said you're waiting for this person applicant to,
Yeah, it's a business one, yeah.
so how do you do they have to have it in by a deadline? And if they don't have it in by that deadline, then they don't?
No, the deadline applied to the application process. So they got their application in under the deadline. I had requested additional information and there was some accounting issues that were internal on their side. And I have been in touch with their CPA and I'm waiting for tax returns and I have not received them yet.
So if they delay and prolong things, what would happen then? Because it couldn't be left open indefinitely.
Well, that's correct, because all the funds need to be obligated by December of 2024, and they physically have to be expended, literally dollars out the door, by December of 2026. But obligated means that we have signed contracts. So at some point, probably this summer, if I don't get this information from this last business, maybe we'll make a different determination or I'll disqualify them. I don't know.
Because in the meantime, there's other parties that might be interested in,
Well, the application process is closed.
well, then there might be other means where that money could go to.
Well, that's true. Yeah. So it's not going to just sit there and languish at some point. I've been told that they're working on getting that information to me, so.
Another thing I was wondering about too is you mentioned the tax returns being a determining factor on whether or not they qualify. So what about payroll records? Would that be, should that be a better determinant as to if they qualify or not? Because on tax returns, somebody could have lower income for the year, but more deductions.
Well, I took that into account. When I took the tax returns, I took that into account, all of those different factors. I had a full calculation that I did, that I applied to all the different types of tax returns. So if they were self-employed, I looked at their self-employed portion of their tax return. If they were business, I looked at their business income and deductions. If they were just W-2 wages, I looked at that. I looked at a lot of different factors.
So what if somebody says, for an example, said that they had medical deductions,
Yeah.
okay, and
I
then
didn't go by what their taxable income was. I went by their income.
their income would be less if there's more deductions. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's your taxable income. On a tax return, you have your income, then you have your deductions, and then you have your taxable income. So I didn't go by taxable income.
Okay.
I went by income. And on some returns, I did look at expenses because some people had increased expenses due to COVID, not necessarily decreased revenue. They might have had the same revenue, but they had additional expenses. So it depends on what kind of tax return it was and what they said influenced or how COVID influenced their.
Yeah, no, I'm only asking the questions because I was just wondering how it was vetted. That's all.
Yeah, I'm just trying to explain.
If it ever comes to that, I'm sure that Barbara could provide us with the formulary that she used.
Where was I?
Getting to the individuals, 15 applied, one
15
didn't qualify,
applied,
and
One
2
did not
were partial.
qualify.
Oh, I thought you said 13 applied for individuals.
No, that was businesses.
15. The maximum grant was 5,000. There were 2 people who didn't qualify for the maximum grant. And at the end of that application, there was $39,000 left in that category.
And there still is.
Well, not yet. Then we get on to the nonprofit category. The nonprofit category was allocated $200,000. The maximum grant was $15,000. I received 24 applications in that category. 3 did not qualify. Within that category of $200,000, 5 grants were direct recommendations by our committee. So that reduced the 200 down to, I think, 157 or something. So the applications in that program exceeded the allocation of $200,000 by $48,000.
I'm sorry, 48?
48,816.24. So as we had discussed, residual funding from other categories was utilized to make that category whole. If that one outstanding application comes in and is awarded their full $10,000, the grant application program will be short $1,616.24. However, there was that unallocated amount of $11,855. And it says in our recommendation that that can be used to shore up these categories if necessary, so that's what I will do. If that one grant doesn't get awarded, then I'll be giving back 7,000, well, there'll be 7,000 something available left in that part of the program. Then we move on to the rest of the ARPA money. So there were infrastructure upgrades that we had recommended. There were 2, one to the sewer commission for 110 and one to park and recreation for 40,000. The sewer commission has been busy doing their upgrades that they had requested this funding for, and they're in progress. And some of the money has been expended for them, but the biggest portion of theirs is going to be the engineering for that tank project. So there's still quite a bit sitting there, but that's well underway. The park and recreation, who was allocated $40,000 for drainage and, let's see.
Outdoor exercise station.
Right, the outdoor exercise equipment. None of that has been spent. So I sent the park and rec director an email and said, I need a status. We're having a meeting today. So here's his response. To follow up, I have already met with 2 contractors regarding the drainage work to be done at Kent Commons Park, and since have begun to put together basic drawings for exactly what kind of drainage systems we want and where. From here, the next step will be to finalize the drawings and then forward them on to planning and zoning / inland wetlands. Once approved, we will then go out to bid on the project. At this stage, we do not have an accurate idea of how much this will cost. Once this is determined, we will then begin to look at the possibility of adding the fitness equipment. So that's what he gave me as an update. These probably aren't in the same order that they are in the book, but it doesn't matter. The next category I have on my report is the volunteer fire department. We allocated $80,000 to them, $30,000 for a fitness room, $10,000 for a stair chair and AED equipment, and $40,000 for a 2-way communication system. The fitness room is almost complete, and it's, at this point, they're very, very excited about it, and it's been well received, and they are just so grateful that we did that for them. They do have a little bit of money left in their allocation just for that, but it's my understanding there are additional bills for electrical work and some interior modifications that they had to do to fit the equipment. So that will get fully utilized. The stair chair has been purchased. It's $3,600 plus minus dollars. So there's $6,360 left to buy the AEDs, which they are in the process of doing. Their 2-way communication system allocation of $40,000, none of that has been spent yet. And the update that he gave me today was our communications officer and fire chief feel it is important to have a town radio coverage study performed to help guide the most efficient deployment of communication equipment. They will be bringing that matter to the membership on Monday. It is not clear to me whether or not that kind of expenditure would conform to ARPA wording, he said. But I already talked to him and told him, no, ARPA money's not going to pay for your study. We're going to pay for the equipment. well, it can pay for equipment, and that's that. So he was fine with that. And that's the update on the fire department. And then lastly, we have municipal projects, $180,000. $26,000 was allocated to the Kent Center School Summer Enrichment Program. $24,000 was allocated to produce this hybrid meeting room. $40,000 was allocated to the Kent Seniors Program through the Social Service Office. $10,000 was allocated for Chromebooks for the Land Use Office, and $80,000 was allocated to DPW break room upgrades. The Summer Enrichment Program is underway. They're creating a 501c3 for themselves, and they're going to be doing an extensive capital campaign. And it's my understanding that they want to use the allocated funding to pay for the consultant and to launch their capital campaign, which is fine. The hybrid meeting room equipment spent all of the $24,000, and $1,587 of the expense ended up in that unallocated bucket because it was more than the $24,000. So they spent $1,500 of the unallocated amount. The Kent Seniors, $40,000 was allocated, and to date, it's been a little bit of a process to get this program up and started. There's still not a clear path forward, but consults are in place and we're working toward that end. Not sure exactly where we are with it yet. There's been a few expenditures. I know that upgrading the senior center is one of the priorities of that funding, but it won't utilize all 40. And I think there's probably going to be some additional programming there. The Chromebooks for land use, when I reached out to her yesterday and said, hey, I need an update, what are you doing? She said, oh my goodness, I'll order them today. So they're on order today. And the DPW break room, Rick has to engage an engineer for some architectural stuff before he can spend that money. So that's where we are.
So do they have to have bids for that job at the DPW? So they have the amount, so when will it go out to bid?
Oh, I don't know.
They don't, because doesn't that money have to be?
A contract has to be signed by December of 2024.
A year from now?
And then the work has to be completed by.
Right. Next year or 2026?
Yeah.
2026.
So we are looking at a certain amount that is still in that unallocated pot, but I would say that given how much is still pending, that we probably should leave it unallocated until we know.
Yeah, it's not that much at this point. It's $7,000. And then depending on if that other 10 gets utilized or not, it may go up, it may go down. It could possibly go down if that whole 10 gets used.
So let's leave it there.
Yeah.
So the individual category,
Yeah.
39,000 less than we allocated.
Yes.
But that amount went to nonprofits, which was 48, almost 49 over, so, that remaining 10 or 11 came out of the
Business.
bucket of,
Well, the business had 8,200 left. So that got added to the 39 that went to offset the 48.
all right, so 8 from business, 39 from individuals,
Went to offset the
so
48.
48 was over.
Right. That's where it stands today. Yep. And I think, really, just my own opinion, but the nonprofits are used to applying for grants, so they had all the infrastructure already in place. Grant writing is something they do a lot of. Businesses, kind of in the middle of the road, individuals.
And, you know, we've had our guesses about how that pot would be used, but we wanted it to be ample.
Yep.
And it was, and I'm glad that it was more than enough,
Yep.
you know, for the people who wanted to put together an application. So, I want to, first of all, thank you for your work on this. Conference.
Incredible work, Arpa.
Really, well organized, disbursement of these funds. There's still work to do. I mean, I don't know what your opinions on the committee are about whether we ask to be disbanded or wait until.
I think we should wait.
I think until it's
I think we should
worked
wait.
out. till-
My goal is to produce an addendum to our report that has all this information in it. All the grant agreements, every single person that got a penny signed a grant agreement. And the grant agreement says that within 6 months, they would report back to us on how this money was utilized and, what it meant for them, et cetera. So far, I've gotten a couple of those back. They're very, very touching. I've had.
Really?
Oh, exceedingly. I've had people cry and thank me, and it's like, it's not my money. I wish it was, I wish I was.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, yes. One woman was so grateful. Her car apparently died the day before, and she had no idea how it was going to be fixed or what she was going to do. And I had sent her an email that afternoon and said, "Thank you, Arpa grant, come get it." And she couldn't believe it.
Oh, that's great.
She said, "I'm going to write a letter to the president."
Dear Joe.
It was very touching.
Well, that's what makes it worthwhile.
There was 2 individuals that applied. Well, one individual that applied and one that talked to me and then didn't bother applying because they didn't file tax returns. They weren't current, and my hands were tied and they needed the money. But I just couldn't modify the rules just for them. So in sticking to the rules, one person got disqualified and one person didn't even bother to apply. And then one person very cleverly applied to 2 different categories. And I thought about that really long and hard, and I thought, well, okay, I'll apply my standards in each category and see what happens. And it just so happened that they actually qualified in one category and not the other. So I was saved on that one. But I thought, I guess if they had really qualified in both categories, I may have issued it, but I really wanted to see, I don't think I would have done it in the beginning. I wanted to see how many applications and, no double dipping type of thing. One of the nonprofits that we did a direct allocation to sent me an application and asked for $7,300 more than we allocated to them. And I made them wait until I had all the applications and everything was processed before I granted them the additional money that they had asked for. It was a lot. I've got 4 big binders up in my office full of stuff.
Well, because you'll need it on
And
the back end.
And the other thing I will explain is that the grants that were given to businesses, individuals and families and nonprofits were checks that were cut and handed to them. They signed grant agreements. The direct allocations that the committee made, I am not just releasing those funds. Those people have to spend the funds and submit invoices to me to be paid. And part of that is a little bit of a housekeeping thing for me so that when I have to do my grant reporting, I have all the information I need. I don't have to chase anybody around for documents. So the fire department has been doing that, issuing invoices to me to get paid. And so will land use, and so will highway and sewer.
I would love to see their new fitness center at some point.
It's been very well received. And
That's
they were
good to
just
hear.
really grateful that the committee understood their need and how important it would be for them. So they were very, very pleased.
Barbara, I have a couple of questions. Would we be able to get any details on the the groups that were, the nonprofits, for example, and the businesses that were approved for
What
the,
kind of details do you want?
well, a list.
Yeah, I have that.
Oh,
And I was every intention of sharing that until it became clear to me that if I do share it with you, then I've got to share it with the public. So I need to redact the individual names off my report, and then I'll give you my report. Has all the names of the nonprofits and the businesses.
because apparently there's 37 nonprofits here in town. I was no, you know,
Well,
who knew? I didn't know there was that many.
I had, what did I say, 24 applicants?
And 3 didn't qualify.
Right.
And that also applies to businesses, we get a list of the businesses.
Yeah.
And I don't want to ask too many questions, but one other thing I was wondering about is that, okay, some of the nonprofits, well, a few of the nonprofits that had gotten grants, they're also in the town budget.
That's right.
So, with that ARPA funding, I noticed it was noted on the draft budget, the ones that had gotten ARPA funding. But it seems that, those nonprofits, the amount of money that was given to them matches what was given last year. So how is that accounted for if they got extra funding with ARPA funds, but they still maintain what they have gotten from the year before?
I'm not really sure I understand your question. When organizations apply for municipal funding through the budget process, they have to provide 4 or 5 different documents and talk about why they should be funded by this municipality. Those have been in place for years and years, and they change, but not very often. And then when COVID hit, some of those nonprofits, and I guess I can use the Housatonic Youth Service Bureau as one, they're in our budget and they also got a direct allocation from us. Well, the need for their services exploded during COVID. And so they had their regular funding from all the different municipalities that serviced their expenditure levy for a regular season or process or whatever you want to call it. And then all of a sudden COVID hit and they had all this other expenditures that they had no money to cover. And so they got a $10,000 grant to help offset some of those expenses from us. But that doesn't change the regular operating expense. It doesn't supplant the regular operating expense.
I see. No, I kind of get it because you're weighing other factors besides the operating budget
Right.
for this time.
Right.
Yeah,
Right,
okay.
if you remember, Joe, we took note of the fact that nonprofits might have, like businesses, either taken a hit in terms of, not being able to raise their ordinary income or having increased expenses like the Youth Services Bureau, and also the fact that any nonprofit has a public mission where their assets can only be used for the benefit of the general public. And, particularly in this community, our community nonprofits are doing things to benefit the public. So I remember having conversations about how their grants might be to make up for those additional expenses or losses of income, but they might also be for additional community programming that would help to remedy some of what we experienced during COVID.
Well, okay, so I understand that. So it had no bearing on the previous budget, operating budget, and this year's operating budget. So why was it noted on the draft budget?
Well, the draft budget is for next year. And these businesses had asked, or the people where it was noted that they got ARPA funding, it was so that the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, when they're looking at this document for the next year's budget, they can see what kind of funding they received from this town. So I'll just use an example. The fire department asked for a larger allocation for next year than they got in this year or last year. So it's important in order to be able to make an informed decision for everybody to know the allocation that they got last year, this is what they got this year. They're asking for this year, and oh, and in the middle of that, they also got an ARPA grant of XYZ. And I think that helps the administration with the
Transparency,
decision.
so you know exactly
Yeah,
what they got.
yeah.
It doesn't really affect the municipal, it's just saying they got ARPA funds.
Yeah, so it would be a reference for next year's budget.
Well, that's what we're working on now, is next year's budget.
But they've already submitted it. The selectmen have already submitted that budget already. What I'm saying is the amounts that were given to these the grant organizations are the same as what they were the previous year. So how is that being taken into consideration with what they're granted for this year?
Well, I'm gonna let you take that, Glenn, because you're on the board of selectmen.
So I think you're saying that there's a difference between entities that get ARPA money this year versus after July 1st. Is that what you're saying? So there's this budgetary season, and then there's next budgetary season, and you're saying is there a difference between?
Well, what I was, if I had a copy of the draft budget in front of me, could actually show you right on
Website, I believe.
Well, are you saying that they should get less in the next year?
I would think so, if they're getting ARPA funding.
Well, but there are certain
But then-
circumstances that cause them to need extra because of COVID. That's why they're getting this ARPA money.
The ARPA funding is retroactive. It was for,
They still need their operating for next year to continue what they're doing. But they got this ARPA to give them a leg up because of the suffering they had during the pandemic.
You don't subtract the ARPA money that you give from their operating budget.
Well, see, they did in the case of the volunteer fire department. They were granted less money because
No,
of.
they asked for more money than they got this year. They asked for substantially more.
Yeah, and the ARPA money was taken into consideration to give them less. Correct, is that correct?
It's the same with chore service, and it's the same with the cemetery. They all asked for more and got less than they asked for next year. It's a proposal. They haven't gotten anything yet. It's still a draft budget.
No, I mean, here's the draft budget here, and the notes, Barbara's notes, says, received ARPA funds, 10,000, 14,000, 80,000. So when I read this, I assumed received, meaning they applied and they will get that this budgetary
Well,
year.
they'll get it when they expend those.
That's when they expend
Yeah.
it. So when I was thinking about this budget, I was thinking, well, they're asking for X amount, but they got this amount in ARPA. I assume that they're going to get it either now or soon. So I think, I can't speak for all the board of selectmen, but this definitely was part of my thinking when we were talking about levels. And I think we actually did talk about that. We actually did mention ARPA.
What did the fire department get this year as an allocation?
Let's see.
Is it 106?
This is line 227. 120,000. I see.
I mean, it seems to me it should just provide context because, there is a difference between operating
Yeah, 106.
expenses and.
Ask us for 120.
Correct, yeah.
And I'm pointing out that 106 was their operating cost that they showed us in previous years, and it went up actually.
Yep.
From that year to the, but that's to show you that, yeah,
Yes.
even though they're asking for more, they did get some ARPA funding,
They got
so.
some ARPA funding.
Right, but if you look at, it really is just contextual. Because if you look at money that is given for the specific purposes of buying a stair chair, AEDs, a fitness room upgrade, and a two-way emergency communication system, those are not operating expenses. And so, I think that perhaps the information is helpful, but it does not, the ARPA funding does not stand in for ongoing operating expenses.
And nor can
It's
it.
meant to make up for income loss and additional expense and things that are related to community impacts that happened over the course of the ARPA pandemic.
Well, see, I was thinking in terms of, okay, well, how is this ARPA funding going to be helping the town's finances over the next year?
It doesn't help the town.
It has nothing to do with the town.
That's not the goal.
It's not meant to, and actually, the final rule states that you can't supplant your operating expenses. The municipality cannot supplant their operating expense with, or revenues with ARPA money.
Right, no, I remember reading that, but in this case with the volunteer fire department, that's, I guess the most obvious example I can think of is that it did lower the amount of spending that's being given to them.
No, it didn't. They got $106,000 in this fiscal year. They're asking for 120.
But they're not being given that amount, they're being
It's in
given
the budget.
a lower amount.
It's in the budget.
Budget.
Anyway, this isn't really a town budget meeting.
I mean, it's in the budget, but this budget isn't even remotely close to being passed or anything yet, so it's
Right,
still
Board of
pending.
Finance has to approve it.
It's still pending.
But the information is provided for context. I think that's the answer to the question.
Exactly.
Is that's why that information was included with the budget, was for context.
I found it helpful as a
So that
sign.
people reviewing the budget knew whether or not that was helpful to them.
It's helpful to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm asking that because I specifically remember listening in on one of the Board of Selectmen's meetings, and one of the members of the board asked the question of, did they get ARPA funding in regard to whether or not they're going to be weighing that amount?
Right, but Joe, that's not really the business of our committee. I mean, we made these recommendations, which were accepted, and now they're in the process of being dispersed. And it's not, I mean, we are not a committee that is charged with making a budget.
No, well, I didn't.
Nor was the ARPA funding ever intended to offset operating funding that is ongoing for the town.
So what's
Whether or not-
wrong with asking about what kind of?
There's nothing wrong with asking. I think that at this point, though, we maybe have answered that question. So if there is an additional question that you have, pose that. But we can't have a discussion, or I mean, we can have a discussion, but we can't really be of any help in discussing the budget because that is not the business that's before this committee. And I'm certainly not ready to discuss the budget.
No, and you're misunderstanding what I'm saying, Connie, is that I'm not discussing the budget. I'm wondering to myself what effect this has had on formulating the budget. That's where I was going.
I think the answer is we can have no idea.
That's for the board selectmen meeting, and I think that's out of the purview of this.
And we really have no idea. I mean, Glenn has told you his opinion that he thought it was helpful. We don't know whether it had any effect at all.
It was helpful then, is what you're saying then. That's a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, any numbers are helpful, and being on this committee and being in the board of selectmen, all of this was, it did guide me. But again, I can't speak for the two other selectmen.
But do we have additional questions of Barbara? Any thoughts that are relevant to the continued disbursement of these funds? And when do we think is the appropriate time to convene again?
Well, first of all, hats off to Barbara. I think she really deserves a lot of credit.
Ton of work and you've done a great job.
Yeah, and I very clear in your, disbursements and how much and who got what and what was applied for. I think until all the money is gone and zeroed out, we keep meeting, or we meet until we know when everything is done.
Yeah, because there may be situations where some of the direct allocations don't get spent 100%.
And then we can,
And then we'll go into
As you said,
the
into
report
our-
part, and then, we can decide.
Anyone have an opinion on when that should be? Couple months?
I think it'd probably be best to meet maybe after the fiscal year end. because hopefully by then, this last application will be wrapped up. Some of these direct allocations will be further along, and we'll be able to see where we are.
Can we get the report before then?
Yeah, I'm gonna just go back and take out the individual people names and then just give it to you.
So why don't you email us that report and, taking the cautionary note that we're not allowed to have discussion over email. If there is anything to discuss on that report, any of us should just let me know that you would like us to convene another meeting, and we'll have another meeting having read that report. Otherwise, July?
Yeah, that seems fair. The next step that I have to do is the first ARPA reporting requirement is upon me, so I have to do that. And then the next step after that is reaching out to the people that got grants and following up on the response letters that they agreed to provide within 6 months. So May will be like the 6-month mark for this disbursement of most of these funds. Some of them went out early November, but I have gotten some back already. I just haven't matched everything up yet.
Do we have a figure on what amount is on balance now in the of ARPA funds?
That will be in the written report, correct?
Well, yeah, but I didn't break it out. I didn't total it up across all categories.
So I think really the 400,000 would be the most helpful.
Well, that's, if I disperse that last $10,000 grant, it's going to be a negative $1,600. So that means there's no money left in that category at all.
I mean, overall, not just the grants, but the.
No, I didn't tally it that way. I didn't commingle it all together.
There's no reason for us to believe at this point that any of those items will not be dispersed. I mean, when you gave your report, you really touched on each and every one of these items. So it didn't really sound like there would be any.
I haven't gotten any indication that there's going to be either unspent totality grant or even the smaller grants. If anything isn't spent, it's going to be a small amount, and it might get turned back to the unallocated portion. But it would be small.
So it's not an actual amount that you know of at this point. It's a
I could add it all
hypothetical.
up, but I just didn't. Like right now in the municipal project group, because that's one group of projects as outlined in our recommendation, there's $154,483.64.
Okay, well, that's an actual amount.
Yeah.
It is, but it's not like it's like up for grabs. It is still
It's
all
allocated, yeah.
anticipated to be allocated exactly as we had recommended.
Well, see, that's what my question was. What is the actual amount that's left in this fund?
In the fire department, they have $53,217 and change left. In the infrastructure upgrades, it's $144,000 and change. And then on the $400,000, it's a negative.
Because the last,
But Joe, she said that they'll be submitting invoices as their projects progress. So you can't assume that that money is left over. It's allocated, they just haven't gotten the invoices yet.
In fact, we won't know, I mean, we wouldn't know if there would be anything like that until December of 2024. It may be quite some time before these funds are actually expended.
so, okay, so now, okay, now I realize that this amount has changed, but the last, prior to this, this meeting, there was, money that was given to the volunteer fire department. I think that was 106,000 plus the amount for the after-school program of 26,000. And whatever balance, minus whatever was in the total amount, that amount was gone. And so that balance is the last amount that I saw.
Okay, the $106,000 is for the general fund. That's what the general fund gave the fire department, not
our
the ARPA committee.
We gave them 80,
Yeah.
and the 26 was to the Board of Ed.
Right. Those
Not
are
the
two, and
fire
the fire department was a category all by itself.
Yeah, because that was dispersed.
No, the 80 is not dispersed. The 80 sits in the town's bank account, and when they give me invoices for these projects, I'll pay the invoices.
No, I mean, going back to June of last year, there was, it says here, to disperse funds to the Kent Volunteer Fire Department and the Board of Education After-School Summer Education Enrichment Program. And with those two amounts added together, it comes out to something like 126,000, something like that.
Well, that June of last year predates
That's right.
even our last meeting.
What I'm
That's
saying
before the
is-
Board of Selectmen even
What I'm
approved.
saying is that's the last amount that I have in my records. And
Can
now.
replace that with the amount that you heard today in your records. Because that is the truth of what has happened, what Barbara has told you about what amounts were dispersed and what amounts are allocated and what amounts are still pending until the fire department makes those expenses and submits the invoices to the town.
So no black and white figure can be given today as to how much money is there, taking away these other things that I have mentioned already.
No, a black and white figure can be produced today. It just isn't the figure that you have. It is a different figure, and Barbara will give us a written report, but she could also do the math right before us today, because she knows how much has come out of the town of the amounts that were allocated.
Can that be done now?
You want to add up the figures? Here you go. You ready? Negative 1616.24. That's your first figure.
Okay, no, I see that.
Your next figure is $144,210. Your next figure is $53,217.24.
So I guess what I'm asking is that there's no accounting right now.
This is her accounting. I don't know what you're getting at, Joe. There's
My
every
question-
bit of
okay.
accounting that you could ever want. I'm
Here's my
totally
question.
satisfied.
Here's my question. I was asking what amount is in there as of today
What's in the ARPA
In
fund?
where?
in the ARPA
And
funds?
what's left from the, what did we get, 800,000?
821, 854.76.
That's been, in other words, to take into consideration, what has been paid out so far?
Oh, my goodness gracious. Hold on, we'll get it for you. Just give me a minute here. I didn't add up the categories because they're distinct separate categories, so it didn't matter to me what the total balance left this minute is, because it's all allocated, but,
I think that's the most important thing, Joe, maybe why we're not asking the same questions that you are asking, because all of the money is allocated. It's all allocated. There's nothing unallocated, and there's no reason to believe that it won't be spent exactly as we had envisioned when we gave our report.
But we have, it was mentioned earlier.
Alan machine. Here. No, you had them up on your phone. I thought you had your calculator
I was about to
out.
do that.
Add them up.
Okay, well, these are the figures that simply have to be added in this.
That's right,
this-
and that gives you what you're asking for.
Okay, that's fine. I could do this at home. Or you can do it now if you want. I mean, I don't want to take up
Yeah,
time
just do
by
it.
doing this.
I'll make sure I add that line to the end of the report.
Yeah, that would be helpful, realizing that there is still well over a year before those funds need to even be under contract. And that they do not need to be fully expended until 2026.
Forget the cents. 15443. Plus.
But I think you've done a really good job of getting them out the door, Barbara, so thank you for that.
You was interesting because the applications came in slowly and then the week of the deadline.
Oh, really?
My deadline's are
That
short.
is also true, very true to my
That's
experience.
typical.
And I have a person that,
It's.
Is Margaret working on their blueberry patch?
Yeah.
the money's been spent. They submitted the bill.
I did it wrong.
They gave you photographs before and after.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, put those in the report.
That's the plan. That's the plan. We just come up with.
I did it wrong. It's. He's got the numbers, it's.
Well, that's, I forget what I wrote on the back up there.
Yeah, no, there's like, has to be like a beginning balance.
Like the blueberry patches.
That's
your thing.
No, those are the ending balance
Friday-
categories. So just
Friday evening, getting very close to 5, so I'm just gonna reel us back in as far as the next steps. Barbara will email her written report, which will include numbers, which will be helpful to all of us in understanding where things are at.
What's numbers?
And
We can meet again if anyone has any questions.
Names.
So if anyone has any questions or desire for a meeting after receiving that report, I will schedule the meeting. But please do not have a discussion on email. If we do not need to meet after receiving the report, we will seek to meet sometime in July to receive a second progress report. And then meanwhile, Barbara's going to continue to do what she's been doing so ably in terms of tracking not only what money went out, but what people are doing with their funding in the case of the individual business and nonprofit recipients, but also to, to attend to the invoices that are submitted for our other pots of allocations. Did I miss anything?
And to answer Joe's question, to add up all these numbers that Barbara gave us, it's roughly $358,000. What I see here, roughly.
Yeah. See, I think of this in terms of like a bank account or something like that, where you get the balance. That's merely what I'm asking about.
Right, but it's not that relevant because the money has been allocated. So you might as well have said it's spent.
Well, yes and no, because Barbara was saying before that if something, if one of the applications or something is not sent back or whatever, that money would be available for
And that,
something else. Yeah. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so with those next steps, I think that we are ready to adjourn. We can all stay and chat afterwards if we'd like to, but is there any more business that should pass before us? And if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at 4:45. Anyone wants to second that? Thank you, Glenn. All in favor, please raise your hand or say aye. Vote. And if any are opposed, and seeing none, that motion carries. Thanks very much. Have a wonderful weekend.
Great job.
thank you, Barbara.
I have a quick question. Is, they have a plan? So how to spend the returns, it's still a plan. They submitted a preliminary plan and are still working on the kinks because some of it wasn't actually eligible for ARPA funding.
So you're working with that.
Yeah, so I think she's new and just still trying to get her feeling.
I did not miss, I guess I wasn't the one doing the minutes. I should have asked one of you to do the minutes. Where was my head? I wrote all these notes.
Are you doing the minutes?
I guess I should have.
Oh, we have to hit stop.
A little, but I'll
Maybe send them to me and I'll,
enhance them.
that's fine. And I was gonna